On March 2024, World Inequality Lab came up with a report on economic inequality in India. The report suggested that economic inequality in India in current times is even worse than that of British colonial times.
Do you often feel that rich are getting richer and poor poorer? It is actually true.
The richest 1% own 40.5% of the total wealth.
Inequality in India is widening with each passing year.
The top richest 1% of population in our country controls more than 22% of our national income and controls more than 40% of our national wealth. Whereas the bottom 50% of the population in our country controls less than 10% of the national wealth. Now, as the world's largest democracy, that is, India goes into election season, redistribution of wealth and inequality in relation to economic sphere has become the talk of all the political debates. This makes us wonder, what is this wealth redistribution? How much inequality is there in our country in economic sense? How can the wealth be redistributed in our country? And what is this debate regarding inheritance tax? All these questions we'll be trying to answer in this particular session. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh, and today's topic is economic inequality and wealth redistribution in India. The top 1% population in our country accounted for 45% of the total flights flown. Only 6.5 users accounted for more than 44% of the total UPI transactions made in our country. Now, in the current debate, the question is that is a redistribution of income or redistribution of wealth something new for India, or has it already been happening in India since last many decades? Now, for that, I would want you all to sit back for a minute and think and introspect for a while. Now, let's take the example of our union budget. If you see our union budget, which is released every year, it is comprising of two basic parts. But before coming to the parts, if you see the basic objective of a union budget, it is that of reallocation of resources and redistribution of wealth. So major objective of a budget itself is redistribution of wealth. And if you see the two prominent components of any budget, that is receipts and expenditure. Now, receipts are majorly composed of taxation. And if you see taxation, one prominent form of taxation is income tax. That is direct tax. And direct tax in our country is following the system of progressive taxation. That is, more the income of the individual, more income tax they will be paying. And where this taxation is used for, where these receipts are used for, these receipts are used in turn to make the expenditure. That is the second component of the budget. And that expenditure, if you see, the highest expenditure the government of India or any government per se does on social security schemes or social welfare schemes. So all the schemes, for example, your public distribution system, your minimum support price, or Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or any other prominent social security or social welfare scheme in our country, it is fueled by the money which is coming from the receipts, that is money which is coming from the taxation. So here also we see that income redistribution or wealth redistribution is happening in our country. Budget in our country has been existing since last many decades. And since the independence, in fact, so we have been redistributing the wealth since independence. Now, if you remember, after independence, we came up with the land reforms. And one very prominent step under land reforms was redistribution of land. And if you remember the Bhudan and the Gramdan movement, there also redistribution of wealth could be seen. So in all these scenarios, in the budget, in the taxation, in the receipts, in the expenditure, in land reforms, and in variety of the welfare schemes launched by the government, the basic principle or the basic tenet is redistribution of wealth and redistribution of income to ensure economic equality in the country and to ensure the welfare and upliftment of marginalized, of the weaker section, of the unprivileged section of the society. Now the question is, what is the debate all about? We all know that income redistribution or wealth redistribution has already been happening. Then what is the debate all about? The debate is that in this current form of welfarist government in India, where redistribution is automatically happening, the question is, should we take money from the rich and redistribute it to the poor in absolute basis? That means, should there be complete parity in wealth and income of all the people in our country? Now this makes us go to another very prominent debate, and that debate is about poverty. That can poverty be eradicated completely? Now the answer is very simple. The answer is yes and no as well. So in absolute sense, that is absolute poverty, yes, poverty can be eradicated. But there is one more form of poverty, that is relative poverty. Now relative poverty can't be eradicated. So absolute poverty, that means a person is not having food, clothing, shelter, or basic necessities to live. Of course, that can be eradicated completely from our country. But relative poverty, that means a person is relatively poor compared to another person. That of course can't be eradicated, because of course in any society there will be some people who will be richer than others and some people who will be poorer than others. And if we establish complete parity in income of each and every one in the society, then what will be the reward for taking risk? Then what will be the reward for working hard? No one would be working hard, right? And here the debate of universal basic income also arises, right? But if we see it very closely, in no way we mean that absolute poverty should not be eradicated. Of course, certain minimum living standards should be achieved by all. But having a complete parity in income of everyone will lead to killing the meritocracy in the society, right? Now, from this entire debate and entire discussion, we reach a single conclusion. That is, promotion of equity in economic sphere is definitely the need of the hour. And we see our preamble of our Indian Constitution. It aims to secure for all of its citizens justice, socio-economic and political justice, and equality of status and opportunity for all. So in our preamble itself, it has been mentioned that we have to ensure justice in economic sphere. And we should promote equality of status and opportunity among all. So there should be no debate regarding this, that should economic equality be there or not. Economic equality and economic equity should definitely be there, because it's mentioned in the preamble. Definitely we as a country should aim to achieve that. But the question is, how do we achieve that? And before answering the question, we need to see some constraints or some challenges which have been inhibiting India to achieve this economic equality, and which has led to India having such high level of economic inequality. Now, I have divided the reasons under 5 very prominent heads. The first is political resistance. The second is institutional lacunas in our society and in our governance system. The third one is the high level of informal economy in our country. Fourth one is the existence of social inequalities in our society. And fifth one is the low level of human resource development and human capital formation in our country. Now, all these challenges we'll be trying to understand one by one. Coming to the political discontent. Now, if we see the example of land reforms, during land reforms also, politically there were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of uprisings, there were a lot of debates which were going on, and there were a lot of conflicts which happened and which erupted because of land reforms, because it was leading to wealth redistribution again. So politically a lot of conflicts and politically a lot of, I would say, resistance can be seen in relation to wealth redistribution from many quarters and from different set of political ideologies and political parties. The second prominent challenge is institutional lacunas. So the prevalence of corruption, the prevalence of bureaucratic delays, the prevalence of red tapeism, and prevalence of inequalities in the bureaucratic system, in the functioning and misgovernance is also leading to inequality persisting in our economy and in our society. So institutional lacunas again is the second prominent reason. The third prominent reason is that of informal economy. Now, you might know that more than 90% of the population in our country, or 90% of the people in our country, are working in informal sector. And if they are working in informal sector, of course their income will be lower, there will be no social security, and the government benefits can't be reaching to them because they don't have any access to the government benefits. And because of that, again, we are not able to ensure economic equality, and economic inequality persists. The fourth very prominent reason is the existence of social inequalities in our society. Now, social inequalities in relation to caste, in relation to gender, in relation to religion, in relation to ethnicities exists in our society even today. And they are very, very deep rooted. Now, because of that also, it is very difficult to establish economic equality. And last but the most prominent reason, or the most prominent challenge, is that of low human resource development and low human capital formation. Now, education level in our country is not at par with the West. Now, skill-based education is not in our country, is not very much prevalent in our country. There is always a very wide gap between the education which the students get in our country and the skills which are required by the industry, and because of which there is a problem of unemployment in our country. That youth in our country is not getting employed. More than 70-80% of the engineering graduates, they are not employable. More than 40-50% of the MBA graduates, they are also not employable. Why? Because they are not having industry-specific skills. So that is again a very, very big institutional lacuna and a very, very big blot to the human resource development and human capital formation in our country. Now, under these 5 heads, we can see why we as a society, we as a country, have not achieved economic equality even after 75 years of our independence. Now, since we have understood that what are the challenges plaguing economic inequality in our country, we need to understand what are the different perspectives of different strands and different thinkers in relation to this economic equality and how it can be established. So if you see the Marxian economist, that is the Marxist economist who are following the philosophy of Karl Marx, they say that economic inequality in any society exists because of automation of jobs and also because of capital accumulation in capitalist society. So they give all the blame to a capitalist society. And what is the solution they give? They give solution of formation of a communist society. Now, if you have seen the previous episode on left-wing extremism, you would know that how Karl Marx's ideology of this communism led to massive violent protest and massive Naxalism spread in our country, right? So, but this philosophy says that establishment of the communist society is the only solution to have economic equality in any country. That is what Marxist economists believe. Now, there are other set of philosophers that we call as meritocratic philosophers. Now, they believe in the philosophy of meritocracy, and they say that in a society, merit should prevail. That is, a person who is meritorious should be rich, a person who is not meritorious should remain poor. So they say economic inequality in a society would exist naturally if the society is a meritocratic society, which benefits the meritocrats, and economic inequality would be a natural consequence of such a society. That is what they say. Now, the third set of philosophers are liberal economists. Now, liberal economists say that, of course, free forces of market should be there, but government should also intervene in order to establish economic equality. And also they say that we should take the help of progressive taxation in order to establish economic equality. Now, you must have heard of a very prominent philosopher named as John Rawls. Now, John Rawls, in his very eminent writing, or in his very eminent book, A Theory of Justice, says that economic inequality in a society can only be justified if it benefits the society as a whole and if it benefits the poorest sections of the society as well. So John Rawls says that we can justify economic inequality to an extent if the overall society is benefited. That is what the philosophy of John Rawls is. Now, there is also an American economist named as Milton Friedman. Now, Milton Friedman relates economic equality with that of political freedom. And he says that a society which puts equality before freedom will get nothing or will get neither of the two. But a society which puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of the both. So in relation to Milton Friedman, he says that political freedom is equally essential or equally important as compared to economic equality. So we should ensure political freedom first, and then economic equality will automatically be there. That is what Milton Friedman, an American economist, suggests. Therefore, we understand one thing, that there are different ways to achieve economic redistribution. There are different ways to achieve economic equality and wealth redistribution in any society. Of course, we need to choose that which way is the most suitable for which particular type of society. Now, since we have understood the debate, we have understood certain set of challenges as well, and we have understood some philosophers as well and what is their perspective in relation to economic inequality and economic equality, let us understand the key solutions, or what are the key proposed solutions with which we as a country, that is India, can achieve certain degree of economic equality and redistribution of wealth. Now, again, I have divided the solutions under 5 different heads. The first very prominent solution, which is the most controversial solution as well, is that of inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax is basically a tax imposed on the billionaires, and it is imposed on a person who inherits assets from a deceased person. Now, it is very controversial, and India used to have inheritance tax, but India abolished inheritance tax in 1985. Now, this inheritance tax is very much debatable. It is supported by some and opposed by a lot of people. Of course, it is there in countries like Philippines, Taiwan, or some states of United States of America as well. But again, this remains very controversial and very tricky. Recently also, you must have seen a lot of debate being sparked by inheritance tax proposal given by one of the prominent personalities. We can of course make a separate video on inheritance tax. You can let us know in the comment section that if you want a separate video on inheritance tax or not. But inheritance tax, again, by many economists, it is suggested as a measure to establish economic equality in a country. Now, however controversial the solution might be, but this is one thing which we might consider, which we can consider to an extent. Now, second very big solution is strengthening the implementational framework. Now you see, India is having no dearth of welfare schemes. India is having a lot of welfare schemes, but where India lacks is in the implementation part. So implementation is flawed in our country. Implementation of welfare schemes, governance of welfare schemes, and also monitoring of welfare schemes is very much flawed. So we need to correct that implementational agencies, and for that we need to strengthen our bureaucratic network, bureaucratic functioning, and also the governance surrounding it. We need to equip our bureaucrats with proper training. We need to have regular checks on our bureaucrats, and we need to see that is a particular welfare scheme functioning to the optimum or not. So regular checks and balances needs to be maintained in this particular sphere. The third big solution is providing high quality education and healthcare. Now by high quality education, I mean skill-based education, and that too industry relevant skill-based education. And of course, healthcare of our country needs to be improved, and affordable healthcare again is the need of the hour. Of course, PM Jan Arogya Yojana is a right step in this regard, but we need to do even more. So these two steps will help in improving the human capital formation and human resource development in our country. So this is again a very, very prominent solution. Now the fourth solution is opportunities. That is, we need to provide opportunities to all the sections, all the stratas, all the strands of a society, irrespective of race, irrespective of religion, irrespective of caste, creed, gender, or anything. We need to provide opportunity equally to all the sections of the society, and here reservation plays a very, very important role. Now again, it is very controversial topic, and we can of course make a separate video on it if you want, but reservation plays an important role in providing equality in opportunity as well. And last but not the least is learning from the best practices and case studies from abroad. So Scandinavian countries or Nordic countries like Norway, Finland, Sweden, these countries have achieved a bit of economic equality, and they rank highest in the human capital index as well. And human capital formation in these countries is very, very good. So best practices from these countries can be incorporated by the states in our country and can also be incorporated by the central government as well. So we need to learn from these governments, these countries, and adopt their best practices. By inclusion of all these 5 solutions, of course, definitely we will be able to ensure economic equality in our country. Now, if you see India is a developing country. Now, lately I have been seeing that there is a lot of disgrace in relation to the billionaires in our country, and it has become a new fashion to disregard billionaires of our home country. Now, on one hand, I see a very stark irony in this. On one hand, we celebrate the foreign billionaires. For example, we celebrate Elon Musk, we celebrate Bill Gates, we celebrate Warren Buffett or Mark Zuckerberg, but we don't celebrate our Indian billionaires. We criticize them a lot. But by that, I do not mean that if billionaires in India do something wrong, they should not be punished. Definitely, they should be punished, but they should not be criticized just for being the billionaires. We should promote billionaires in our country, and there should not just be 100 billionaires or 200 billionaires in our country. There should be thousands and lakhs of multi-billionaires and even trillionaires in our country. Only then we as a society will be able to grow. So we should be willing to promote more and more unicorns, more and more billionaires, and we should celebrate wealth creators rather than degrading wealth creators and criticizing wealth creators. We should criticize, of course, any wrongdoing done by them, but we should not criticize them just for acquiring wealth or just for being wealthy. We should celebrate them so that more people from the lower strata, lower section of the society, they come up and they become multi-billionaires and even trillionaires. Only then we as a society will progressively grow, and India will be able to become developed by 2047 when we complete 100 years of our independence. I hope you learned some new perspective from this particular session. All the very best and have a nice day.